I would also say, like, you've had your whole life to, right, evolve and be a man, and you have those experiences. I have to adapt to those experiences. So that's why, like, I feel when people are like gender identity, it's innate, it's authentic, and all this stuff. Like, okay, yeah, I might have been dysphoric as a kid, but for me to sit here and say I've always been a man, it's bullshit.
Sure.
It's bullshit. I've always felt dysphoric, but that could have meant a lot of different things. And I didn't know what it was like to interact in a group of men until those men saw me as a man. It's totally different. But I guess one of the major things that I took away or consistently take away from your channel is you focus a lot on mental health. Um, is there a particular reason as to why that's your go-to?
Sure. Well, yeah. So yes, I think so. Like I was talking earlier about, like, I'm interested in issues that are divisive, and I think divisive issues are divisive not at like the, Libertarian Party versus Socialist Party. It's divisive like amongst friends, amongst family, whatever. And for me, anytime we're talking about like an abstract issue, economics or something that's like,
Mm-hmm.
again, gender, race, or anything like that, people personally get invested in that. People's personal identities are staked in that. And that usually can lead to anger and conflict or whatever.
Yeah.
And I actually, so like, I view the topics I'm talking about as having like actual consequence in terms of like everyday people's lives in conversation at the minimum, but then in actually how it plays out. But specifically in regards to mental health, I started, that channel. I had been in therapy for 5 months at that time. And I had never done that before. And it was, it was like pandemic was, or it
Yeah.
was, it was March. I was, life was going well, I guess. And then everything flipped, pandemic, lockdown. I live on my own. So, it was nice when I was like going into work and seeing people. But it just went to hell, and we didn't know how bad it was going to be. And then the riots broke out and everything. And it was like everything was coming on all at once. And then I didn't know how to handle it. And then I saw other people were fighting and saying stupid shit. And so it's like,
Yeah.
so when I do videos, if I do a video on, gender issues, or I did one on critical race theory, it's like I'm interested not in just like, oh, here's the academic nature of this. It's like, here's how this issue causes people to hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is a primary contributor to the mental health crisis. I think it's like, people are isolated. We're on social media all the time, and we are in our bubbles. Obviously, we have the algorithms feeding us stuff, and it's like, to the degree that I'm trying to achieve something or fill a gap, it's like I want to just be able to speak intelligently, but also honestly, not just like we're gonna approach this and just be purely intellectual about this and that. It's like, no, if I think like critical race theory is fucking bullshit if it causes white people to say that black people who are successful are white supremacists, then I'm gonna say that, and I'll be honest and say I get why people might be tempted to believe that, because there is a history of racism, and that does affect things. But, I think the mental health thing is basically just any abstract idea has to relate to your day-to-day life. Otherwise it's just intellectual masturbation at that point. It's like that is people do a lot of that, and it's annoying.
No, I know they do. I don't usually come across somebody that uses that, and
Yeah,
that's like,
yeah.
well, I don't want to say that's like one of my favorite things that I took away from last year. It's intellectual.
Nice. Yes.
It just I heard what's his name, James. He used that quite a bit.
James.
The kind of like the basically like the king of trying to dismantle wokeism.
Oh, James Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
used
Oh,
that once,
yes.
and I was like, "That's actually really hilarious."
Oh,
That
yeah.
really
Oh,
is what it is, though. It's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know people who will be like
Mm.
very smart and can articulate
Yeah,
complex ideas, but it's like, dude, at a certain point, you're so detached from the underlying like action that this abstract idea is supposedly related to. That
well,
it's
it's kind
just
of like what you said. You're not. You want to be able to be honest, and something I find with a lot of these people that do intellectually masturbate is that they are going through these books. They go through the academic. What is this book telling me? What is the literature? They
yeah,
only go by that.
right.
Where to such a point that they can't even think on their own, and which is insane. They can't, be reasonable. I did also like, actually, that reminds me of that one video I made where somebody said uh, that destroying property isn't violence because these aren't reasonable times,
Yeah,
right?
Nicole Hannah Jones. It's like
Yeah,
any reasonable
yeah,
person can agree that destroying property is a bad
right.
thing, but these are not reasonable times.
Mhm.
Therefore, now we're going to allow it to happen.
Yeah, which is that's insane to me the way that they kind of just flip things around, right? They could somehow find a way to be understanding about something that makes no sense, but yet when you bring up, the fact that, well, okay, for example, should a child be able to get a surgery that they may later regret? There's,
At 12 years
again,
old or something. Yeah.
right. This is something that they go to the literature, whatever that means.
Yeah.
They can't actually think about what that the weight of that decision could be for a kid.
Right.
Um, it's
They'll
crazy.
pull up the study like, "Oh,
Yeah.
here's a study." And that's a common thing I see with like the internet debate community is, it often devolves into like, "I'm going to cite my study, you cite your study." And it's like, "Well, hold on. Whatever the issue is, maybe it's minimum wage. It's like you can find studies that do this. If you
Yeah.
cannot, but if you cannot verbally articulate what's going on, then the study is as much up for interpretation as the idea itself. And so it's like, again, it's
Mhm.
like you were saying, like a 12-year-old. It's like, look, I'm sure there are studies of surgery done on minors, and then 6 months later they're still happy. They don't
Mhm.
regret it. Therefore, that's a success. And it's like, okay, let's think about this logically. A 12-year-old. I mean, I think about going back to the mental health life. It's like I think about the amount of growth I've gone through in the past year. I'm 24, so
Yeah.
a year ago I was,
Right. It's
in a my mannerisms are the same, and I'm the same person, so to speak. But like I grew up so much, and to think that at 12 years old, then people are advocating that, okay, yes, if someone has a
Mhm.
certainty that they need to do this, that we're going to allow that. And it's like, look, you can pull whatever studies that and again, it goes back to, okay, well, we have to look at the study. What does it say? And on one of them, I did a video and I got in an argument on the comments, which you should never do. But
Yeah.
I say the study, and they're like, "Look, most of them said it was okay." And it's
Mhm.
like, literally look at the survey question. It was within 6 weeks after the surgery. It's like, and
Right.
you've had Grace and Daisy on, I saw, and I know you interview detransitioners regularly. It's like some of
Mhm.
them it takes a year or two or more to realize it,
Yeah.
and it's just.
It's a huge change.
Yeah, and it's
I
just
mean,
so, is this so self, this is what I mean about, like, we can talk intellectually. It's like, it's so obvious. It's a kid. It's a
mhm.
12-year-old
Yeah.
kid. You
Right.
wouldn't let them make decisions about smoking cigarettes. You wouldn't let them make decisions about,
Mhm.
taking steroids.
Mhm.
And I don't know.
Do we
Yeah.
need like scientific proof for all of that?
Well, and it's just right. Exactly. And it's just like, and to your point about,
Yeah.
people look, this is the most important thing. And I made this point on that podcast with my friend Owen. It's like I think about gay conversion therapy. It's like, okay, gay. It's pretty easy, and I would say it's a just thing to do to say, parents who send their kids to gay conversion therapy, they're bigoted and f them, they're ridiculous. And I'm like, you know what? I feel that way, and I
Mhm.
feel kind of the same way about parents who put their kids on hormone therapy. But then I try and go, okay, let's step back. What is the position they're coming from? For gay conversion therapy, like if you're a Christian and you genuinely believe that your kid being gay will send them to hell, like genuinely, then putting your kid through gay conversion therapy is in their mind, their I would say, I don't, warped or deceived mind or whatever. They're actually saving their kid from hell, and they're doing it from a place of love. And
Yeah.
I've seen interviews with gay people who went to gay conversion camp, and that was like the worst thing about it is that my parents, it was like fear for them. Like the
Mhm.
fear of hell is a real thing, and if you think your kid is going to go to hell, I can understand why. And on the flip side, for parents who, I've seen interviews online of parents who are going to, raise their kid genderless or do surgery or whatever. And it's like, I don't, I think it's an unbelievably small minority of people who would do it for political reasons or like, I'm making a statement. It's like, no, I genuinely believe that this is the right thing for my child. Again,
Mhm.
that, I would say they've been deceived by a ridiculous ideology, just like the
Yeah.
fundamentalists who send their kid to gay conversion therapy have been deceived. But the people who are so quick to rationalize, well, but these studies show this, it's like they they've already come from the position of I'm doing this for the right reasons,
Mhm.
so I'm going to figure out any way to rationalize it, which is just how the fundamentalists do it from their side.
Yeah.
Well, I've already decided being gay is a sin and we have to convert it. I'm just gonna figure out, no, it's for the kid, it's for this or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, so
No, that whole thing is crazy. I was actually having a brief Twitter conversation earlier on conversion therapy and trying to get the definition of this in regards to gender identity, and it doesn't make sense. They cited Stonewall and quoted them, which was something along the lines of suppressing a person's gender identity through talk therapy. So what does that mean? Because talk therapy is the most common therapy that we all go to
sure,
at some
right,
point.
right.
So I mean, it's just insane. I constantly have to, like, kind of going back to how we started this conversation, which is your reaction, right? My initial reaction is I just want to throw something and just cuss because I'm like, what the fuck do you guys? Are you guys crazy? It doesn't make any sense. But obviously, I have to realize that I'm talking to somebody who is deep into an ideology and they can't see it. It doesn't matter how I explain it.
Yes.
Um,
Ideological possession is a very
yeah,
useful
totally.
term. I don't
Yeah,
know if I mean, you
yeah,
clearly aware of Jordan
ideologically
Peterson.
possessed. Yeah,
Yes,
totally. Yeah,
I'm heavily influenced by Jordan Peterson,
I know. I
and the
saw that.
yeah, yes, yeah, I've
Yeah,
got a
I
couple
like him
fun
too, but I
videos.
was like, I think you're a bigger fan
Yes,
of him.
I take pretty. I've got a notebook full of notes from the lectures,
Right on.
but there's been some super useful things in terms of
Mm.
he talks about one instance of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote about the Soviet Union and when people were being taken to gulags. He talked about how in the gulags, in the communist camps, people would be brought in who were like card-carrying members of the Communist Party, and they could not believe, even while they were imprisoned, even
Yeah.
when communism had failed to the point where the people who were supporting it were put in prison themselves, even
Right.
when they were in prison, they would still rationalize how, no, the Communist Party is right, this is just an error, or like they would write, the example he gave is a woman was brought in and her daughter wrote to her and said something to the effect of, if they brought the Communist Party says you're guilty. If it's so, if they're lying, I'm not going to join like the communist Hitler Youth version or whatever. And if they're not lying, then I never want to talk to you again. And the example and what Solzhenitsyn said was that this person wrote back and said, even though they said they were innocent, they'll say, I'm going to tell my daughter the Communist Party rightfully imprisoned me because the worst thing for her would be to not join the communist Hitler Youth or whatever. And that's an example of just like
That's exactly what's happening right now.
ideological possession. Yes, people
Yeah.
their personal identity is indistinguishable from
Yeah.
a political position, a conclusion to an argument, something to that effect, and then they just rationalize and rationalize it until the last moment things are broken down. And
They're so extreme, and they're going to keep going extreme to achieve this. I don't even know what they're trying to achieve. Well, they don't even know what they're trying to achieve. But these same people will, they'll come after me and be like, oh, you just want to be liked by so and so. You're just, you just want approval from people, and it's like, I mean, I'm not winning anything over here. I'll have the religious right after
Sure.
me, and you crazy people after me. So, what exactly am I, am I gaining from speaking out? Not really a whole lot, except like I want to keep my dignity. But my point is, like, it is also really bizarre how they're kind of like in a trance. They're just repeating things from some script that they all agree on, and
yeah,
they'll
it's almost like an algorithm. Like
yeah,
once you
it's
know
creepy.
the couple tenets, you can
Yeah,
produce what their arguments
yeah,
better than they can because it's just an algorithm.
right, exactly.
It's
Yeah,
because of patriarchy. It's because of racism. It's because of this. It's the same thing the fundamentalists do. It's the same thing Alex Jones does with the
which
globalists. You
yeah,
figure it's like we're going to make everything attribute it to the globalists. We're going to make everything attribute to white supremacy. We're going to attribute. It's like it's just the same
but
game, different
except at least
colors.
when they define things, it kind of makes sense. But with people that are typically leftists, they're redefining words, so you don't really. I can't even follow. I don't even
Sure,
understand.
language reconstruction. Yeah,
Right, language reconstruction.
yeah.
But I mean, honestly, again, kind of going back to the whole the beginning, the whole mental health thing. I think that is probably one of the main issues right now is mental health. We're living through a
Agreed.
reactionary timeline. Like everything is outrage. Nobody wants to think. everything is outrage. Everything is my side of the political party is right. Yours is bad,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not obviously going to make people feel better mentally. They're all 1 second from exploding on you, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And how do we even turn that back at all, if we even have a chance, or do we just keep riding this wave to fall off the edge?
Well, right, and I think it's what we can talk about in this is identity, because it's about like a lot of it I think is people looking for groups, like you said, people go to tribes or whatever. So if I'm signaling, virtue signaling
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter or whatever, leftist stuff or right wing stuff, then I know I can lean back on my right wing friends or left wing friends, and I'll have a
Yeah.
group or whatever. And especially during the pandemic when people are isolated, that impulse is driven even more. But I think I I think it is the it's a philosophical question of like what is identity exactly, and I think how it's being played out now, like going back to language deconstruction, is like, this is my gender identity, this is my identity. It's like identity is not a simple concept, but I think the way it's being used now is tribalistic, in that like identity is the group I can be part of. You look at the LGBTQIA, it just new letters are added each time and stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of, well, we're going to put labels. I think I saw something on demisexual, which is like, what is it? You're only sexually attracted to people who you have a emotional connection with. It's like, that's like a normal human being. Like,
Yeah, right.
that's how I am. I wouldn't call
Yeah.
myself a demisexual. I wouldn't concretize that term and use it as like, oh, you're demisexual too. Like, we can, as if we're sharing some common experience, when it's just like, that's just one narrow part of my identity that's different from other people's. And
But
so,
you're also probably sapiosexual, so
well, I
you like
describe
intelligent
myself
women,
that
I
way.
assume, right?
Yes,
Which is another dumb one.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Yes,
who
and
doesn't?
even to the degree I've made jokes about that.
Yeah.
It's like I'm attracted to. It's like, yeah, it's like, dude.
Nobody likes anybody stupid.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Oh my god. Yeah.
actually, I feel like that's kind of wrong in itself, because if you're creating a label that says you're only attracted to smart people, well, obviously you're leaving out stupid
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, it's just
very
like,
phobic.
it's funny because like the same, like we were just talking about, like, it's an algorithm, right? It's once you know the couple axioms, once you know the couple formulas, you can spit out their argument. The same language that is used by people where gender is the most, gender ideologues or race ideologues. Well, then it translates into like fat phobia or whatever. It's like that
one's crazy too.
But
yeah.
it's the same language.
Right.
It's a what I don't know exactly what the words are in terms of, like, is it a slim centric society, or it's ableist or something like that? It's oppression of.
Oh yes, disabled is another one.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Disability
right.
status, and
Yeah.
class is the original one, which is all of this stems
exactly
fundamentally from critical theory, which is a Marxist ideology, and nobody disputes that. Vosh or any of the main, left-wing YouTubers, who I would argue are kind of the think tanks for a lot of this ideology. It's like that's self-admitted. It's a way of viewing the world that it puts people in groups, and that is the identity part of it. Is, okay, I want to be in the group that my ideology says I'm the good person, and then now I have a bond with people who we are fighting for the good. And a lot of it stems, I think, also from the fact that it's a lot of privileged people. It's a lot of people who feel guilty about being privileged, and that's something I talked about in therapy. I'm as privileged as it gets. And I was like, I feel like I have a responsibility, and like you were saying, it's like, I take risks saying these things. You and I both take risks saying these things. We're getting heat as much, as much praise or whatever, or compliments we're getting. It's like, there's heat. There's negative stuff about that. So it's like, it's a lot of privileged people who feel the need, and instead of actually doing the hard work of saying, well, what is actually the truth? And what are things that I could say that would make people uncomfortable but are actually true and beneficial in the long term? And they are unable or refuse to do that.
Yeah. What did you mean by you're saying? So like you recognize you have some kind of privilege. You don't have to get into like what it is exactly,
Sure.
but what is there guilt or expectations that you feel you're pressured under, that you have to
Well,
do certain things, or?
yeah, so I would say it's when I like thinking back to the conversations I had in therapy, it was kind of like I was born in a wealthy suburb, and I never in my life did I have economic concerns where like I was going to be able to afford food or rent or something like that. I've never had to experience that. And then I live in the Chicagoland area, and I'll drive through a bad neighborhood, and I'll just see how other people are living simply by virtue of the circumstance that we were born differently. And it's like,
Mm.
you know, I do feel I did feel guilty of just okay. Then I come home and I play video games or I smoke weed and I sit on my ass. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's not really like I'm capable of more than that, you know.
Yeah.
And so going back to the like
Mm.
why I started in the first place is like there's actually doing the work. There's actually putting money where your mouth is, donating money. I'm fortunate enough to have a decent job where I can, put at my own resources towards certain causes or whatever. But
Yeah.
but then it's also like, no, it's actually speaking, saying difficult truths, which again, like, in therapy, that's sort of the central theme of that is like, yeah, I have to say things about my, friends, people I love, all that stuff. And it's just like, so
Awkward.
awkward and
Yeah.
it's because then you have to deal with the consequences of that and all, but it's like it's
Yeah.
always you're always better for it. You're all like,
Yeah.
and I just think like
Totally.
I have friends who, group of friends, half of them are conservative, half of them are liberal, or maybe one or two of them are conservative, one or two are liberal, and like the liberal one would say like, if you supported Trump, you're a fascist and you can go fuck yourself, like on their Instagram story. And then it's like, okay, so now like we're in a group together, and I like, if you really believe that, you're sitting with someone who did that. So do you not like this person? Are you going to talk behind your back? If not, then you really don't believe what you said, did you? And it's just like, that's what I mean when it like plays out in the individual level and stuff. And it's just like, there's a need to talk intelligently and honestly about it. I think it's more important to be authentic than like rational, so to speak, which that's not important to be rational, but it's like, you can't treat everything with you can't treat everything with neutrality. Some things like, I'm not gonna, some ideas, kind of to your point, is like people will just argue or repeat their ideology or whatever. It's like, at a certain point, the best way to deal with that is like ridicule sometimes and be like, you're advocating for abolishing the police. You think zero police, like really? So if I come at you with a gun, you're like, well, I'll just not call the police. It's like, okay, say that online, please. Come on the podcast, say that online, and then let people see you or see that belief for what it is. So I don't know. That was a wide circle.
No. I would say another thing to that in kind of regards to all that is, we are, and I'm sure, Jordan Peterson has talked about weak men and strong men and all this. But I guess from your take, I haven't really discussed this on my channel much or probably at all, is how do you feel pressure in that sense? Obviously, there's a lot of weak men today, in my opinion. So do you feel pressure to live up to this, again, kind of expectation of
sure, like a masculine archetype or something like that?
Of what a strong man is, and I don't know, or even is that something that you ever thought about? We could actually, from here, we could kind of head towards the gender talk.
Sure, yeah. What does it mean?
Yeah.
So I would say, I never like the guilt I felt and the fear, I would say, because I would say when like after the Black Lives Matter riots and after everything really started to divide and like very obviously, like I still am concerned with the direction of the country and the direction of society, and it's like a big driver in why I'm speaking about things the way that I am is like, it would be both ignorant and arrogant of me in my 24 years of life to assume that because things have been stable, at least in my life, which hasn't been for other people, but because things have not fallen apart during my time here, that's going to be the case for indefinitely, and I don't have to do anything about it. It's like when society falls apart, when when the community that you are in is threatened by instability and all that, or instability,
Yeah.
it's like that's my responsibility. It's your responsibility. And so I would say the idea of the weak men thing, it's like there certainly are weak men. There's weak people, I think. I don't know. I don't know if and I don't know if it's weak men. Well, it depends on the definition of words. There's certainly a lot of
Hmm.
dispossessed men on the left
Yeah.
and the right. And I think,
Oh yeah.
like, when I think of Antifa person or alt-right person, it's the same
Totally. I
person.
agree. Yeah.
And I've argued with them on Discord, much to my,
Yeah. They're cowards hiding behind an ideology, is the way I see
and it's just,
it.
and like, it's not, isn't like it's like people don't argue to make a change. They argue it's a dominance thing. It's just a game, like
Yeah.
exactly the same way you would play a video game and fucking beat your ass. It's like we argued and blah 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 whatever. And there's a lot of that. I never. I do think about like the notion of like what Jordan Peterson talks about is like for men there's a greater emphasis on like taking on responsibility.
Hmm.
Right, like his point is, and this is a point made by Jung and a bunch of people, is like, like women, the archetypal hero's journey for men and women is like, well, women, I think the term that Jung used is like women, like grow into their purpose, like when they have children, they're generally speaking the primary, people responsible for raising the child, and men are too, but men have to. Or I think the quote Jordan Peterson is like, women understand their purpose, men have to figure it out, or something to that effect. And it's like, that, I responded to that a lot of just like, I've watched, it's like, I am one of those men that sat and watched hundreds of hours of YouTube, not like funny videos, but like actually stuff I was interested in, like Jordan Peterson
Hmm.
lectures or other stuff, and
Yeah.
history and all that. It's like, I know some things. I can actually speak up and say, hey, my left-wing friend, you have a good point about society being systemically discriminatory. Like there is systemic discrimination. The drug war was designed to take out, or was to break up anti-war movements and black communities. Like we can call that, that's systemic racism. That's fine. And we should do something about it. You're right. And then my right-wing friends, it's like, okay, yes, we are in the greatest country that ever existed in terms of just look how much privilege we have. You and I can have this conversation. People can tweet how much they hate capitalism for their iPhones and stuff. It's like,
Hmm.
like being able to bridge that ground, I felt was just something that, I was able to do. And so for me, the idea of like, what is like the man, or like what kind of man would I try to become? What does it mean to be a man in terms of taking on responsibility? It's like, for me at this point in time, that's what it means. It means doing this. It means
Yeah.
saying things honestly, even though, there will be pushback. And
Yeah. I mean, it is a really, and I mean, I might put you on the spot a little bit, but
no worries.
um, the whole, because I mean, I hear obviously in regards to the discussion around trans, it usually typically revolves around female spaces and whether or not kids should be transitioning, and it's very obvious why that is. Also, in the case of sports, you don't really hear guys bitch about, oh my god, there's trans men in sports, they're killing
Yeah,
us,
they're not really
they're taking, yeah,
taking the
right, because
records.
it's right, because it's very unlikely that that would happen, so you don't really
Right.
hear that. But I am, in thinking about what a man is and what a woman is, right, and kind of focusing on men, because you're here and I don't usually talk about this. um what a man is, and in the concept of like strong or weak, seems to be definitely changing, whether we here agree or not. Because like today we see, we want, or not we want, but I see that like we want to embrace a man who's fluid in his gender expression, which, you know what, that's fine, to each your own. If a guy wants to go wear a dress, go for it.
Sure.
But then we also see men who are completely comfortable with, the erasure of what a woman is, and they're not standing up for women. So, and then of course we have me. in the picture here, like coming in, and that's also adding something to it. So I'm always curious because I don't really hear dudes say much, and I also don't and I also kind of get why that is. You know, I kind of went over why that is. It doesn't really impact them the same way,
Right.
and I mean, I think men typically are going to be bitching about stuff in general, but because it doesn't phase you as
Mm-hmm.
much, right? But yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm going at with the whole discussion is like, do you feel like in any sort of way, and I mean, this isn't really about me, but just in general, like, do you feel like you're now being pushed into a new category of what a man is because of all these sort of changes with what a man is? I don't know if I delivered
Sure.
that
No.
correctly.
Yeah, and
You get what I'm
and
saying?
yeah, and I mentioned something. Or this reminds me of the a point I made in a video about transgender children. Actually, was
Mm-hmm.
we. This is going to sound. Society is changing. Society is advancing. Like yes, and 500 years ago, men, in order to survive, in order to be successful, you needed physically aggressive men. You needed like men who
Yeah.
could actually kill people and and be. That was so that classic archetypal definition of a man that was necessary for that time. But we're in a
Yeah.
different time now, where I would get my ass whooped in a revolution or a survivalist scenario. So that's not. I'm not that. That's not the masculinity that I seek to
Mm-hmm.
um, to aspire to, so to speak. Although increasingly, if things get worse, that might be a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think like the decoupling of like the necessity for physical strength and physical aggression,
Mm-hmm.
given the society we live in, which is technologically advanced and doesn't require me to be a hunter. The underlying trait of like competitiveness and speaking truth and willing to take on risk, that's the underlying masculinity that I think is subscribed to the degree that there's weak men or there's men that are being pushed away from the category. It's go along with whatever you see on Twitter,
Yeah.
blend it or like. And I have friends who will paint their nails or whatever, and it's like that fits them. But there are certainly people I think that like wearing a dress or whatever. It's like, are you doing that because you feel that's part of your aesthetic or because you know that that's like in vogue right now,
Right.
And it's like that to me is that's a more nuanced form of what
Mm-hmm.
weakness or like conformity and not being able to speak up or whatever. And to your point, it's like it doesn't affect men. It doesn't affect men's sports leagues. It doesn't affect
Mm-hmm.
men's prisons. It doesn't affect
Your bathrooms or
yeah,
whatever, like,
man.
doesn't.
I saw a TikTok of a woman in a massage parlor who had, or not a massage parlor, not a massage parlor, that would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like a spa. And I don't know what the scenario was, but she said that she had like her daughter was with her, and there was some
Oh, I
man who
heard.
was identifying as a
Yeah.
woman and walked and like was
Mm-hmm.
just had their genitals out. It's like, I really did kind of, and to some degree, I think there is like an element of, there's certainly people on the right who will say
Mm-hmm.
a transgender in the wrong bathroom. It's like, no, screw that. it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like there's some reasonableness to be had here, but sports, prison, it's like those
Yeah.
are those are obvious enough and high stakes enough in the case of prison, certainly that
Yeah.
I think it is responsible. And this is something I was like, because when I started my videos, I posted them on Facebook. They were for my friends. I knew I was gonna be put them on YouTube and maybe post them on Reddit or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's grown now where it's mostly people I don't know. But it was originally like, okay, if I was gonna make this video for one of just someone I went to high school or college with, and it's kind of like, look, you know, I am privileged. So for like when it came to Black Lives Matter, it's like I don't have people in my life that are immediately affected by racism or police brutality. Well, that's not true. I have people in my life affected by police brutality, but like racism or systemic oppression. But that doesn't absolve me of the responsibility to speak up and speak out on their behalf. And the same thing was like with transgender people. I had a friend or have a friend whose sibling is transgender. but I don't like talk to them ever really.
Hmm.
And so it's part of me almost felt like, am I being inauthentic? Am I feigning outrage that
Yeah.
like there are young women, for example, who are losing scholarships in sports or being put, in the worst
Yeah.
cases, being put in prison with men. And it's like, well, because it doesn't affect me, should I not speak up about it? Or it's like, like, aren't I? Am I smart enough or self-aware enough to know that even just because I haven't met them, that they're not real and they're not deserving of, you know, people advocating on their behalf and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
you can't even, yeah, like, if
I don't think it has to impact you to speak out on it. And I don't think that you
neither
have
do
to
I.
be,
And
transgender to speak out on it, which I see this a
right,
lot, like it's like you have to be the identity to speak about the identity or what impacts that identity, which is complete bullshit. Because
right.
if actually we all spoke on it, there might be more, I don't know, rationality being thrown into the
Yeah.
discussion, perhaps.
Yes. Truth is not limited to one identity or the other. If I say a statement and
Hmm.
it's true no matter who
Yeah.
says it. Like, and people, the people who make that argument about, well, you have to be a certain identity to speak on it. It's like,
Yeah.
if I'm white and I say Black Lives Matter, you agree with that as much as if a black person said Black Lives Matter. But if I'm white and I say,
Hmm.
we shouldn't have reparations, well, it's because I'm white. It's like, okay, never mind all
Yeah.
the black people who you've just written off and silenced. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna this I don't know, this related ish or not,
Yeah,
but
and I ramble a lot,
it,
so,
totally, you're fine. I go all over the place too.
yeah.
Hopefully somebody's gonna get something out of this
Yeah, yeah.
discussion. But no, I was thinking about what I asked you in regards to trans people and stuff like that, and I was thinking about I had wanted to get this guy on once, but I wasn't able to connect to him. But it was a dude from God, what's that group called? Not okay, the opposite of Antifa for like the right.
Proud Boys?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this one dude in there I was gonna try to get on, and somebody sent me their website, and I went to the website, and somewhere in there it says, like information on who they are.
Sure.
And then I kept reading, and then eventually, boom, right there. Okay. It says how you could like join or be a member, and they're like, it's strictly said you have to be born male. Um, and obviously like that's fine. That's fine. Like I'm
Sure.
not about to go throw a fit over this, but it is very interesting because you don't really this isn't a thing, right? You see women they're called turfs, right? But you don't
Mm-hmm.
really see the same thing coming from, you don't really see trans men upset and starting, to call men what terms or whatever, like,
Radical
you know
men's rights. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, you're not gonna see that happen, which I kind of have an idea as to why that's never gonna fucking happen. But but it is interesting, to me, anyways. And I don't see anything wrong with that. Like, I see a need for certain spaces to remain for certain people, and that's fine. I'm not offended by that because you know what? If I was gonna hang out with a group of trans men, which I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I would ever hang out. They would have to be very easygoing. But if I was
Sure.
like, and I said, Paul, you're coming with us camping, like I feel like it would be a different. I'm not saying that it would be like super cringy. Maybe you'll get something out of it, but I still think that you probably had prior experiences in a group of men that is going to differ from hanging out with trans men. Like, I'm saying this,
Sure.
I feel like that's reasonable, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that. Um, and I'm sure that your experience, like, everybody's always like, one of the things they ask me is like, well, what does it mean to whatever, live as a man or whatever?
Mm.
And I'm like, you know what? All I know is that, yeah, my biology is female. I transition because it just works for me. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm not going to claim that my experiences are exactly like Paul's.
Mm.
But it and I would also say, like, you've had your whole life to, right, evolve and be a man, and you have those experiences. I have to adapt to those experiences. So that's why, like, I feel when people are like gender identity, it's innate, it's authentic, and all this stuff. Like, okay, yeah, I might have been dysphoric as a kid, but for me to sit here and say I've always been a man,
Mm.
it's bullshit.
Sure.
It's bullshit. I've always felt dysphoric, but that could have meant a lot of different things. And I didn't know what it was like to interact in a group of men until those men saw me as a man. It's totally different.
Right.
So I have no idea how we got here.
Sure. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was gonna
jump
say,
in.
like, so I was in a fraternity in college,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
like, it wasn't like the hot shit top tier. They call it top tier fraternity,
yeah,
whatever, the Sperry's and the whole fucking 9 yards. But but there was like maleness and masculinity. It's like, dude, like it's
yeah,
there's no universe. And I think this is a problem with just how deep our thinking, our meaning, like our society, and just
mhm,
people who are spend a lot of time on social media in particular, of how deep the whole collectivist ethos has gotten into us, where like
yeah,
there's no such thing as a universal male experience, or black experience, or white experience, or Italian experience, or trans man experience. It's like there is the experience that every individual has. And this is what intersectionality gets right, so to speak, is like there are multiple dimensions on which your identity exists. So like you're a trans man, but you're also white, and you're also whatever economic class you're part of, and it's like all of those things make up the individual.
mhm,
And it's funny because you just take that to the logical extreme, and what do you get? You get individuality, right? The
yeah,
ultimate form of intersectionality is individuality. It takes into account every single
mhm,
dimension on which you could possibly vary, and that makes up the individual person. But there is a reality in terms of like, yeah, like if I'm around men. I played golf 2 weeks ago, and I was just at home, so I just signed up myself, and then I got paired off with two 56-year-old guys, and within about 30 minutes they're talking about fucking their wives and all this shit and stuff, and it's like, would they be doing that if I was a woman? No. There's
right,
certain things that are um like contained within group identities or whatever.
yeah.
Um, but those things, I don't know. To me, that's very
Would you,
superfluous,
yeah, would you
right?
say that that's like, I'm just kind of trying to take this conversation somewhere. So
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not trying to pick on you, but would you say like that's
By all means.
toxic masculinity? Because that a
I
lot of
think a little bit.
people,
I think to the degree that concept
yeah,
has merit, which it certainly does. They're toxic fucking men, and God only knows. You talk to a woman about it for more than 10
yeah,
minutes, and you'll hear about it. So, yeah, and it's a superfluousness. It's like it's kind of like sports. It's like, well, men are more into sports. It's like, I'm a Bears fan.
oh
More.
shit.
I know. Well, I was gonna say
No,
more.
no, I don't. I
No,
just
no, no.
my roommate is, and I give him shit all the
Yeah,
time.
well, we might have a
Um,
good year this year because we drafted Justin Fields.
yeah,
Just put Mitch
right on.
Trubisky back to bed. But who, like, okay, well, men are more in sports. It's like, do you know how superfluous and not binding that it's good for small talk.
Mm,
Like there's certain elements of small talk I have access to with men that I wouldn't have with women, and it's like, okay, but I think people vastly overestimate the degree to which that matters, and it's like,
mm,
again with the past year, I like had a lot of conversations and sort of re-establishing friendships and rethinking them, talking about like, I'd have issues with friends where
yeah,
we'd be assholes to each other and never really admitted it to each other, like as a group or individually or whatever.
yeah,
And that, and I had those conversations with my male friends as much as I did with my female friends, and it's like, again, going
mhm,
back to the mental health thing, it's like the depth, the stuff that matters is all individual. It's all individual experience. What
yeah,
is your unique experience? It's got nothing to do with stereotypes or collective
mhm.
ideas and stuff. So
Which again is probably another issue I have with just the whole this gender ideologies, that a lot of it is on stereotypes, and
sure. Oh yeah, it's virtually
it's yeah,
predicated on that. Yeah.
right, totally. And it's like you know, I don't know. I just don't ever think about it. I personally, me, I don't ever think about it that way. Like I don't feel as though when I'm around girls or guys, I don't think about how I'm behaving and try to behave a certain way. Um, I might,
Yeah.
yeah, like I don't really think about it too much. I do think about what I'm going to say a lot more now. That I
Sure.
will say.
Man, and yeah, dude, that like the notion of, I think the thought that came to mind was like, that's worrying about how am I presenting in a group setting in terms of if do these people think I'm cool? Do these people think I'm man enough? Do these people think I'm smart enough? Do these people think I'm politically in the right direction enough? It's like, that is all, look at it, whatever dimension you want to look at. That is a result of, for me at least, was like insecurity of like, okay, I'm coming into this group and for one reason or another, I have to act a certain way, or I have to I have to get their approval or something like that. And honestly, a major thing for me since I've started doing these videos, and since like people from high school or people that I never talked to would just reach out to me and say, hey, really like your videos, really appreciate stuff. It's like, man, last people I ever would have thought, people I never talked to, were like, yeah, that video about porn addiction or whatever. It's like, that was cool. It was helpful. It's like, okay, that gave me a sense of confidence of like, people, Paul's not man enough for Paul, or Paul, he's a right wing Trump supporter now or something like that. And it's like, well, first off, that's all bullshit on the face of it. But even then, I don't care. You know what I mean? Well, definitely the Trump supporter thing. But it's like, even then, it's just like, there's, I think it's a cliche to be like, don't give a fuck what anyone thinks, and like conformity's fuck, because like you have to give a fuck what other people think. Like you have to be part of a community, you have to be, establish a relationship, you have to have friends and all that. So you need to care what people think. But certainly our generation, certainly people who spend all their time on social media, certainly people who I think this is the common thing, is like, once you see enough people get mad on Twitter or get mad on social media, unconsciously you start to project that onto people you meet and assume, okay, if I even like, and I still get this feeling of like, man, like I really don't think that a 12-year-old should be getting a double mastectomy or whatever surgery or whatever. And it's like, that is so fucking self-evident, and 90% of people believe in that. And even my very left-wing friends fucking don't believe that. And yet there's still this element of like, well, if just one person, you're a bigot or something. It's like, well, now they've tapped into that Twitter geist, which is in everybody else's mind, and now no one else wants to speak up. It's like, I don't know. It like I said, it programming is a good word. It unconsciously programs us way more than we realize. And speaking out, like I said, people would reach out to me and stuff. It's like, you don't realize how powerful that is, to just be like, yeah, I don't believe this, and I'm willing to say it, and I know I'm not a bad person, and I'm just gonna say this. And
I mean, I'm pretty sure maybe you could relate, but I know I find myself having to take a lot of breaks from social media now that you're on it, right? Because if you're making a video or even talking to somebody, that requires you to, watch content and keep up with stuff. And by the time you're done with that, you feel your mental health, or at least personally me, my mental health, I feel like I'm way more anxious and on edge, I'm more likely to just snap. And it's not a good place to be in, which I find that very, very difficult about, doing YouTube, is making sure that your mental health is not declining because you're trying to work on content by keeping up with all the craziness. And then also not reacting to comments or tweets that, and I especially on Twitter, I'm bad on that. Like, it's like, why am I responding to a cartoon avatar, you idiot? Like, but I still do it. I'm like, every time I do, I'm like, you fucking idiot, you did it again. So I don't know. How do you keep on top of your mental health now that you're doing all these videos?
Yeah, well, I distinctly remember I took like 2 weeks off of Twitter, or maybe more, 2 or 3 weeks, and it was almost like, because like some things on Twitter, no matter who, and I follow a wide range of people, but let's say people are following whoever. It's like some things on Twitter will trend to the point where everyone sees them.
Yeah.
And when I was off of it, I think it was actually during. Do you remember the Korean spa shooting, or there was in Atlanta, there was a shooting at like a spa, and they were saying it's what sparked the Stop Asian Hate kind of movement. I wasn't on Twitter for that, and I remember like this would never have come up, right? Like how many people were murdered of every race in every city over that same weekend, and yet this was brought to the forefront. And it's like, like I get it, obviously, and I feel silly even having to be like, yeah, well, that was bad, and we should strive to not facilitate any type of Asian hate, but it's like, again, that and as a white person, maybe it's not up for me to say, but like I don't think that
Yeah.
Anti-Asian discrimination is on the list of like top 10, 15 problems in America that need to be addressed in a movement when there's drug war and economic inequality and people, committing suicide left and right. It's like, and I just remember, and there's other examples of, like, I was talking to a friend today, and Bo Burnham,
Yeah.
comedian, she didn't know who he was, and I'm like, man, based on my social media, it's like I see Bo Burnham memes and Bo Burnham music and all that stuff coming through all the time, but like this person didn't even know who it was, and I'm like, it creates, it gives the illusion that everyone is operating on the same references and the same memes, and they aren't there. And
I do think that the whole it did seem like Asians were there is an issue there, but it always does seem like when it's related to a person's identity that it's blown, in my opinion, out of proportion to such an extent that it becomes like the biggest problem in
sure,
America.
right, right, and it's exactly that, and it's like, it's, and fear mongering implies that there is a concerted attempt, which I think there is to some degree. But it's not. It's like school shooting. Okay, you can't get any worse than that. But again, it's sort of like, it's like I liken a lot of what's happening today to what the conservatives did after 9/11 with Islamic terrorism. It's like 9/11 killed 3,000 people, a lot of people, and Islamic terrorism is a major threat to this day all over the world, primarily to Muslims. But the probability of any average person being affected by that versus whatever myriad of mental health issues people face is virtually nothing. It's, I mean, like, how many more people die in pool drownings or falls from ladders or something like that. It's like we our sense of proportion is vastly distorted by social media. I think that's one of the biggest problems, and it's it's hard to have that conversation. It's hard to be like, guys, like, yes, there's another mass shooting, but again, how many people died in Chicago? How many people died I think this weekend, I think there were 8 people shot or something over 4th of July weekend, highest ever. It's like, but you don't hear about it, and it's socially acceptable to just. In fact, if people bring it up, you can say, well, you're only bringing that up because you just insert whatever reason, you're just bringing that up because you want to distract from the other issue we're talking about. It's like, whatever. But to your point about the mental health stuff, it's like, as far as just for me, for the content stuff, I try not to do videos that are reacting to stuff that's happening in the moment. I'll pull from stuff that's happening relevant, like the critical race theory. Because that's brought to the mainstream, I was able to kind of just do YouTube and research that. But that's, I would argue, and this is something that Jordan Peterson had pointed out years ago, and when I was in college, I have a minor in gender studies, and I saw this philosophy play out firsthand on the first day of class when my professor quotes and says, remember, everyone, to each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It's like, okay, we're just going to quote Karl Marx, and it's like, fair enough. Yeah. Like, we can talk about Karl Marx. He made good critiques, but everything else was garbage, and all of the stuff playing out the way it is, and everything is racism, or everything is patriarchy, everything is this. That's all a function of the idea, well, everything is class consciousness, everything is class related. And so, again, rambling. It's easier for me not to, oh, this happened, so I'm going to talk about this in particular. It's like any video I do, I try to think is like, will it be relevant a year from now? And like, if it's not, then I try to avoid it. So it's less Twitter. Yeah, Twitter. God, like, I hate engaging on Twitter. I don't have that many. I've got 150 followers, thank God, and I don't link my Twitter to my YouTube because I don't want to have to start relying on it. But I probably will eventually, and then. I
mean, it is a good way to put your videos out there.
But, well, that's how you and I got connected.
It is a mess.
So, yeah,
for sure. You have a minor in gender studies. Do tell.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Yeah, so it was. I was a sophomore when Trump got elected, and the next day in class, my major is in supply chain management, which is like
Okay.
The opposite
Not.
of gender studies,
Yeah, I was
basically.
gonna say that's definitely not gender.
Yeah, right. So it was all business classes, and the next day we went into it, and none of my professors brought up the election, or like it was like, okay, the election happened, you can have the day off, but like there wasn't any conversation about like, hey, wasn't this kind of a historical thing? Like, can we at least talk about the business implications at least, you know? But we didn't. I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous that I'm at a liberal arts school
Mm,
and we're not talking about a very relevant event. So I said to
yeah.
myself, the next semester I'm going to take a class where I know for a fact they will talk about it. And I picked gender, race, and law, which was a 400 level class. And then I took it, and it was relatively easy. The professor was very lenient. Like, we had a final paper that was supposed to be due. We had like the whole semester to complete it, and then like 2 days before, like people emailed and said, "Can we push the deadline back?" Which like you would never get away with in even any class really.
Mm-hmm.
The professor's like, "Yeah, we'll extend it 2 weeks." It's like, oh my god. So it was very easy.
Yeah.
That was the sad part. Well, depending on how you look at it, but then I only needed 5 classes to get a minor, and I was like, well, I already took the 400 level class for gender studies, and I could get out the other 4. And so that was the kind of cynical, practical reason I ended up doing that, because you didn't have to read as much for a philosophy degree, basically. But the I would say deeper, more fundamental reason is like, I mean, I knew that gender studies and those fields are sort of like I was saying with like the progressive YouTubers, like that's the think tanks for a lot of the progressive stuff. And I saw what was happening in there now playing out, and it's like this is exactly the consequences of this kind of thinking. This is exactly, I for example, I could go for hours about the perils of critical theory and all that stuff, but like,
So you were saying?
For the gender studies thing. So we were talking about female genital mutilation, which you're familiar with?
I know.
Yeah. So I made the point, and I was the only male guy in the class, and it's like, and for a lot of those classes, it was just so common to hear. I've got several stories, but I'll stick with this one for now. Female genital mutilation. I said something to the effect of like, yeah, it's pretty barbaric, which, in gender studies, barbaric. It's like you superiority type thing, which is like, no, I don't even want to describe it, but the disgusting nature of female genital mutilation, if anything in this world could be described as barbaric, it's female genital mutilation.
Yeah, I agree.
And several women were making the point that, well, like you can't criticize those countries because America has problems too, and you don't understand that's a colonial perspective to say that like one culture is better. It's like, are you fucking joking?
That's fucking insane.
And I would argue that the ideology underpins that is that female genital mutilation is a violation of human rights. But to your point about language, about how they're redefining language and its deconstruction is like the technical term, the notion of human rights is a Western construct. There isn't like it's Western people made that up, and then they would point to, well, how many times has the term human rights been used to justify colonialism or whatever? They would liken it to, well, white colonizers spreading civilization to civilize the savages. It's like, look, there are always rationalizations you can make about anything, but when you get to the point where you're saying that human rights are not a real thing, this is why the world is the way it is, because you don't even realize the implications of your ideology. You're just letting it play out, in you. Another example, this one woman said something to the effect of, I went to a big state school, and privileged people there, a lot of them. And that we were talking about, she said, I don't know what the subject was, but I just remember her going, we're talking about like working class jobs or something like that. And she said, I just hate how in America we like venerate working class jobs because it's mostly white men in them. And I was just like, lady, if some coal miner heard you say that, like when you sit in this classroom, in this air conditioned classroom, it's like, it's just, and she had such righteousness in her voice. And it was just like, it was anger. It was legitimate anger. And it's just like, I saw the microcosm of everything playing out on social media and now in politics and now in
Yeah, I don't know how
institutions
you
and all
sat through
that.
that class, to
Well,
be
dude,
honest.
a lot of times I put my head down of just like, because I was the only uh, straight white dude in at least two or maybe three, and they would just say something like, it would just be casual, like straight white men did this, or like when a straight white man says this, and I would just be like, I always sat in the back corner and I was always just like,
Not me.
yeah, just I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut and just listen and
God, just all your
learn.
classmates sound like so much fun.
Oh yeah, it was. I learned a lot. I'm very glad I did it, and it's a fun joke to make
Yeah.
to my female friends where I can be like, technically, I'm more qualified to speak on women's issues than you are, and it's
Mhm.
oh here we go. But yeah, that one gets me in trouble sometimes. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, be careful who you say that
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, so that was the
one of
my
I wanted to bring something up and then probably get close to closing it out.
sure.
But
Yeah, yeah.
you said something on your channel about how you know people when people see children being kind of screwed over by gender ideology, that it is. I don't know if you said it will or it could.
Push
Um,
people to the right.
yeah, and you were saying like it could create like a bunch of like right wing extremists.
Yeah,
I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate
sure.
on that.
Yeah, well, so here's my thought is I have a lot of cousins and friends who are apolitical completely. Don't even know who Karl Marx is, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, I've, I'm not an expert. I haven't read all that, but I know what it is and can articulate it and its relevance to things. And I think most people who are politically minded, at least have heard the name.
Yeah.
You think about the apolitical people like that, and I think my cousins who have like they're a little bit older than me, so they've got kids who are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I just think of an average person, not on Twitter or not on any of
Mm.
that, and they're at their kids' high school track event or whatever, and a 14-year-old male, no transition, no anything, is competing on the women's sports team and dominates. And everyone's seen the images of people playing, the giant handball guy or the Rachel McKinnon or the power
Yeah.
lifters in the most. Like you could not come up with a more like God.
No,
We need
it's
to
it's
separate.
it's it's perfect. I
Yeah,
love. I mean, I hate that it's happening, but I love that we have images because it's like,
yeah,
yeah,
right. Which
someday in the future, we're
yeah,
gonna look back
and to the degree
and
that
yeah,
see
we're gonna see
that
these pictures and be like, what
yeah,
the
and to the
fuck?
degree that I'm optimistic, it's because I think like when comedians are like considered right wing, when Dave Chappelle is considered right wing because
Right.
he'll make
Exactly.
a joke about transgender people, just like he'll make a joke about anyone. It's
Mm.
like okay, but my point in that was regular people who don't know anything about politics see that and rightfully go, "This is nuts. I
Mm.
will vote for whoever is against that because that's all I'm concerned with." Most
Mm.
people don't vote, right? So most
Right.
people couldn't care one way or another. So they will be a one issue voter. And when it's something ridiculous like that, I believe there was a opinion piece in the Washington Post, I believe it was,
Mm.
that said something about there was that argument about kink at Pride Parade,
Yeah.
and I think there was an opinion article.
Oh yeah, I remember. I
It's like I
I
want my
think
kids to see it or something like that.
yeah, wasn't that like where was it from? New York Times
I
or
think it was
something?
Washington Post, maybe.
Washington. Yeah.
Democracy dies in
I didn't
darkness.
read it.
I didn't read it either.
Yeah, there's no point in reading it. Really, the headline is
I want my and
yeah.
it's like
I mean,
that like when it's like
you might
you
as
don't
well be
understand.
saying you want to send your kid off to be surrounded by a bunch of fucking pedophiles or something like
I
that.
mean,
That's how ridiculously
yeah,
gross that sounds to me, anyways.
yeah, and to most people, and especially
Hmm.
people who aren't like they're not like oh well this is the reason she's saying that is because she's trying to expand the notion of sexual identity like it's fluid and all that and we can embrace it and talk about it. It's like
Yeah.
no, that's not how that plays out. How it plays out is regular people see that and they immediately say, "I will go with whoever's against that." And and it's I think it's the same thing with like Trump. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people just voted against Trump. It's like I don't care what the fuck it is.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just sick
true.
of Trump. And I think that's how most people, certainly people who are not politically oriented, make their
No, you have a
decisions.
point. Because we see this with right. We'll see some. For example, there's a lot of feminists who speak out against this trans ideology, and they are not on the right. but they will
Yeah.
definitely, they'll definitely have a conversation with somebody on the right. They'll
Yes.
definitely go talk to
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson,
Yep. J.K.
so
Rowling. Yeah, like
yeah.
when J.K. Rowling is right wing now,
Oh
the
my
word
God,
right
yeah.
wing means nothing. It's like
Exactly.
goodness
Yeah.
gracious.
So
And
so
yeah.
you're right. Yeah. I mean, people have to go somewhere, right? If you keep calling people transphobic, bigots, and whatnot, and you don't give them a chance to speak, let alone hear them out, yeah, they're gonna have to go somewhere.
Yeah, it's the idea of repression. It's like a fundamental tenet in psychology, Freud, Peterson, whatever, whoever you want to talk to. When you
Yeah.
repress something, it comes back with a vengeance. And if you repress people's like, "Hey, this is nuts," and I know I'm not the only one that thinks this, but I can't really say anything about it, that comes back of, well,
Right.
I'll vote for whoever the proto-fascist is. I mean this. Right now, I think the left is currently, because they have the institutional capture, they have the power as it stands.
Yeah.
Right now, that left is a bigger problem, but I think in 5 to 10 years, I think you and I are going to be focusing more of our time on the right and a religious resurgence.
Hopefully, we're still alive.
Yeah, well, assuming
And
there's anything
pass up the
left in 5 to 10 years.
gulag.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, yeah, and it's
I
just
don't
like
know.
so.
It's fucking. It is crazy. I mean, it really is. Because I mean, even in the LGBT, right, we see a lot of LGBTs are sick and tired of the T's. So what are they
Yeah,
doing? They're leaving. They're
yeah.
gonna form their
Isn't
own
there an
thing.
LGB alliance or something like that
Yeah,
that's
there
separate
is.
from
So
that?
it's like
Right.
now the T's are. People like me are fucked apparently. But
Right.
yeah, it's like, dude, what the hell? It's crazy. It's just crazy how divided we are, and we
Yeah.
continue to be because, I mean, just something as simple as science, right? We should be able to agree on scientific facts. No, now we have right wing science, left wing science. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of. I mean, I don't see it that way, but that's essentially how
Sure.
a far leftist does, right? They see it like you believe in biological sex. That's a turf whistle. That's
Yeah.
a
Right.
that's a right wing
That's a
whistle. And
that's a product
yeah,
of Western European
right.
constructed
Yeah, that.
science, therefore
Um,
invalid.
yeah. So it's crazy. It's crazy to see. I mean, I don't know where we would end up at this point. I'm honestly trying not to be terrified, but it's like, all right, so we're gonna just split into two categories here. I don't know.
Yeah. I plan on making a video someday soon called "Make Enlightened Centrism Great Again." That will be the path back
Yeah,
forward, because
yeah,
yeah, it's nuts. But I think conversations like this are impactful, and I never really considered, like, the Joe Rogan has a huge reach or whatever, and you might have a couple
yeah.
people, but like you and I exist in a network where we affect 50 to
Right.
100 people more, whatever. It's
Mhm.
like then that snowballs and that snowballs. It's like
It is kind
in
of crazy.
especially now, individual people have way more power than they realize. And yes, that gives me
Yeah,
optimism, I think.
which is why I'm glad that you're making your channel because
Yes.
it does. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, right? You have 700 ish, right, subs. I have like 1,000. I mean, it really
Yeah.
seems like nobody's watching this shit,
Sure.
but
Well,
people do. People do. They share it, and I mean, it
oh
does
yeah.
make a difference.
And it multiplies
Despite the
over
fact that you
time.
have a tone, sometimes
Right.
it's all right.
Well, and I think, like you giving voice to detransitioners. Like I think the most marginalized people in society right now are you could make a case are like the detransitioners, because
Yeah,
because the people who are usually the ones
mm,
advocating for marginalized are trying to
crazy, huh?
silence them, right? When the head of the Human
What the
Rights
fuck?
Campaign says
Yeah.
to Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes, "Don't
Mm.
air this because right-wing people might use it as ammunition." It's like,
Yeah,
and yeah,
but you
and
don't
when
really
you
see
and when
them. You don't really see them invite. You don't see these other networks. I want to see, is CNN going to invite a detransitioner and
right,
actually give her the opportunity to share her story exactly how she needs to help other people?
right,
Probably not.
right, right.
But
But
yeah,
I first saw it, like, I think it was Daisy Chadra or
yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it.
yeah,
So
something like that.
yeah.
She came on your show, and then I saw her on Benjamin Boyce, I believe, and it's just
Yeah,
like it
yeah.
multiplies.